Thanks for watching live or listening back to this show from Teachers Talk Radio. You can catch up with all our shows by visiting our YouTube channel or by listening back at ttradio.org. Don't forget to like and subscribe to enjoy more live education conversation from TTR. We hope you enjoy this show.
Outstanding, a world-class vision, a world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's debate show with Tim Smale. We have the late debate. And today we're going to be talking about AI in the classroom and whether it's going to play a positive role in our lives, it's going to save us a huge amount of work and a huge amount of effort, or whether it's something that maybe is a little bit more cautionary, something we need to slow down just a little bit. I'm going to be introducing to the show my guests, Darren Coxon, Rita Bateson, Chris Calder, and Simon Lightman, who will join me as we sort of explore the topic from a variety of different perspectives. Now, to set the scene, the government is very much pushing AI as a solution to the teacher workload problem. They're setting it as a solution for funding within schools. They are talking about it being used for marking, for planning, for administration. An EEF trial also found that ChatGPT with proper guidance could reduce lesson planning time by 31%. But only 9% of teachers feel confident with AI, and almost a quarter say that they are not confident using it themselves. In addition, it feels that there is a significant gap between the expectation that schools should use AI and the support that teachers are receiving. Whilst it feels clear, at least on my LinkedIn feed, that there is a strong argument for AI to be used in schools, are we missing the point? Does AI actually improve or have the potential to improve learning? So I think this is going to be one of the most divisive questions. Is AI the answer to our classroom challenges, or are we creating new problems while claiming to solve old ones? We're calling tonight's show Growing Pains, because whether you're excited or horrified by AI in schools, nobody thinks that this transition is going to be painless. And tonight's panel is made up of 5 different voices with very different views. We have Darren Coxon, the co-founder of Compass Education. And that's an organization that is looking to provide schools, colleges, and public institutions with the training and support they need in order to innovate safely and securely with AI. Darren is a globally recognized leader in AI-driven education solutions. We'll be joined by Rita Bateson, who is the co-founder of Viblana Learning, whose mission is to turn AI chaos into clarity. Rita was the founding head of School for Ireland's first IB Continuum School, and she is also someone who continues to be commissioned by the IB to develop their programs. Rita is someone who believes deeply in research and ensuring that all stakeholders are AI informed, AI safe, and AI empowered. We have Chris Calder, who is a computer science teacher and education consultant who has a mission to ensure that schools implement AI strategically, safely, and ethically. Chris has over 20 years of experience in the classroom and appreciates that schools face an unprecedented pressure to adopt transformative technology without the expertise to do it safely. We have Simon Lightman, who is an educator and writer working at the intersection of philosophy, education, and systems change. His work really focuses on how schools can cultivate judgment, responsibility, and flourishing in a time of rapid technological and social transformation. And finally, the Luddite in the room. I'm Tim Smale. I'm a teacher of history. I'm someone who is concerned that maybe we're solving teacher problems by creating student problems as we introduce AI at an uncontrolled and arguably siloed rate. Now, today's discussion is not about winning an argument. It is about honest, respectful disagreement between people who care about students. It is an effort to bring discourse back to education. So I'd like to just welcome onto the stage the guests in the room. And of course, where would we be without the sound effects? That's my 7-year-old daughter. So I'm going to set some ground rules, and just to make it clear to our listeners who are listening to the show live and to those who are going to catch up via podcast. We are here to disagree, but we're not here to score points. If you agree with someone, then please say so briefly and then move on. If you disagree, feel absolutely free to dig in as long as we're doing it kindly. My job, I think, tonight is, where my expertise allows, is to be as provocative as possible. I will try to interrupt. That's my job tonight. And for those of you who are listening to the live show, then we want your questions. We want your challenges, and please do contribute to the chat. The best ones will be put live to the panel. Before we begin, I'd like to just shout out, because this show is brought in partnership with Hachette Learning. They are publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So level up your professional development today, and please do visit www.hachetlearning.com to explore the full range of titles. So guys, thank you so much for coming tonight and welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We'll warm you up, don't worry. So part one, we're going to be talking about AI's potential impact on learning. So the question is going to go out to all of my guests, but Darren, I will be starting with you. You guys have 1 minute, please, to tell me what is the biggest opportunity or the single biggest risk of AI in the classroom right now?
Well, I think the biggest opportunities to maybe support making learning relevant again, to make education meaningful again. You know, we have 20% of students are persistently absent. We've got almost 1 million students who are not in education, employment and training. We've got a quarter of students who have recognised mental health conditions. This is a really big crisis that has nothing at all to do with ChatGPT. That has everything to do with the system which is on its knees. And I believe that we have the opportunity to use AI as a tool, not the full answer, but as a tool to be able to support moving our education system in the direction that it needs to head in order to actually become meaningful and relevant again, and so that students actually want to be in school rather than have to be in school.
Okay, thank you. Rita?
Gosh, it's a very British context there and a very British perspective, and we work internationally as well. So I hear some of those concerns in a lot of schools I visit, but not exclusively. I think for me, the biggest focus of that first year was assessment and validity and all of these things that kind of impact what Darren is saying. For me, the greatest opportunity is just that. It's being able to rethink assessment or learning skills or whatever we want to call it, to give students a completely different experience, to give them a very different goal and a pipeline to the knowledge economy or a pipeline to trades or whatever it is that where they need to be and need to go. It's also the greatest risk, I suppose, in terms of cognition and creativity and all of those things that we worry about in the abstract. It's been made very, very concrete and very clear to us that these things are under attack. And as you said, are they the solution or are they perpetuating the problem in a different direction? Yeah, it's a lot to think about. But I think if we don't engage with these ideas, we're being professionally negligent, I think, to serve those students that Darren talks about.
Thank you. Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, AI's got a really sort of massive opportunity to help the students, especially the low attainers, with feedback, especially when they're struggling in school, similar to what Darren was saying about the kids that are, I think, the ones that don't really want to go to school, the ones that are sort of left in the system where they're not really part of the sort of mainstream way that the school works. And I think that opportunity there to help those particular students are is a sort of massive advantage with AI. But at the same time, I think those particular students are probably the most at risk from it, with engagement and the different ways that AI can be like a double-edged sword in a way, where you can use it for massive advantages, and at the same time it can be really quite dangerous for vulnerable students.
Thank you. Simon?
I'm going to do the annoying philosopher thing, which I guess I'm going to be doing quite a lot this evening. But I think before we start thinking about the opportunities or risks of AI, we need to kind of zone in a little bit on what we mean by learning itself. Some of your listeners might be knowledgeable about the work of a chap called Gert Biester, and he talks about learning within like 3 domains. So you have qualification, which is about knowledge and skills; socialization, which is about how we live together, how we think, how we argue, etc. And then the final goal really is what he calls subjectification, which is this idea of how we help people to become independent, agentic thinkers who can take responsibility for themselves, etc. So if we start thinking about that, I think the opportunities become quite clear. So AI clearly can support qualification. It can help students model how to do things. It can free up teacher time. I've seen it myself. I've seen students who have been able to improve their writing skills by working alongside AI. But I think, and I will talk about this a bit later on in the conversation, but where AI starts to complicate things is in that socialization element, in the idea of how we personalize learning in a way that is attentive to each learner. And ultimately, if the goal of education is to try to help people become responsible, informed, involved, partners in a shared world, then if AI is reducing all of the friction, reducing all of the uncertainty, then I think we need to be really, really careful, because it could make it much more difficult and challenging for students to kind of make judgments, take responsibility for their thinking, etc. So yeah, for me, it's all about supporting learning, but looking at kind of the balance between how do we do that while allowing people to still have agency in the world, which is what we most definitely need in the complicated times that we live in.
I think my perspective is one of concern at the moment in terms of the pace of change. I worry about the impact this is going to have on learning, because I worry that what we're going to be able to see within our students is the mimicry of learning certain concepts, that students will be able to parrot what they've kind of developed from AI and pass that off as their own thinking. Yeah, I see enough at the moment. There's not enough data from a longitudinal point of view to sort of show that AI is actually going to benefit learning. But that's not because I don't think it has the potential to do so. But we're going so fast on a concept that we hope will work, rather than having those secure foundations in place. Or at least that's my perception from someone at the coalface, and please do disagree.
I'm going to jump in there if that's okay. Are we allowed to do like point of order or whatever? It's classic debate.
Absolutely.
I'm just wondering, like, Simon, when you say we need to be careful, and I take Tim's point, I wonder if that moment has already passed. Like, the moment for deliberation and care wasn't really afforded to us. It's here now. It's been invited into our classroom. Well, sorry, it's engaged in our classrooms. It's engaged in our curriculum development. I'm not sure we had a moment of agency around, or a pause to say, okay, this is the impact we'd like to measure, or these are the things that it might change for the better or change for the worse, because we're constantly playing catch up. I don't know if that's something that maybe, had we had time to prepare for this, we could have had those conversations, but I wonder if those conversations are now 2 years old.
100%. Sorry, is that okay to respond to? Yeah. So like 100%, but I think all changes, paradigm shifting changes, always happen in an emergent fashion. So there is always this sort of iterative feedback loop going on. So the idea that there ever could be this moment of agency, I think to be honest, maybe isn't something that ever really exists apart from something that we aspire to. So I think really the question is, given that we are, as you say, Rita, completely immersed in this, how do we then try to step back, understand what it is that we are trying to achieve in our learning, in learning, you know, and then ask ourselves the really precise questions about, okay, is AI helping in each of these areas? You know, is AI helping us to provide better skills and knowledge? Is it helping to help people to understand how to navigate the world? Is it helping them to have agency? And that's the kind of framework that we have to apply, even though you're totally right. The reality is we never had the moment to really choose. And actually that point about speed, frictionless speed and optimization has become this, like, you know, wonderful thing. What's that school in the US where it says you can crush academics in 2 hours?
Alpha.
Yeah, you know, crush academics in 2 hours and then, you know, spend the rest of your time doing whatever. So when things are optimized for speed, that flattens out complexity, and learning is always slow. And I think we need to be having conversations about how we slow down in a way that is thoughtful. But yeah, no, I take your point.
Is that the case that schools need to push back, that we're not being driven by an intent to benefit learning, we're being driven by an intent to keep up?
I think that sorry. I think that the speed that this is going at is causing a massive gap between people that have jumped on board early and have learned how to use some of these tools, and people that are still saying, no, I don't want to. So when I'm in school, I see people that are amazingly brilliant with AI, that have moved forward. They've got safeguards. They're really looking at it from a sensible perspective. But I also see people just with their head in the sand saying, no, I'm not using these tools.
And is there something wrong with that kind of approach? Because I guess what we see there is correlations with, you know, as Darren touched upon, ever increasing levels of mental health concerns within schools, which seems to correlate with, I don't know, from about 2012, when we start to see that increased proliferation of social media and increased screen time. You know, are we sort of putting the cart before the horse here, that actually we are putting something like AI in place, even though many teachers are hesitant about putting it in place, because we've maybe got things the wrong way around, and that we're just worried that we've got to keep up because we're being told we have to keep up?
But I would say there's very little AI being put in place inside of classrooms. I mean, I'm working literally day in, day out with schools across the world. And actually what tends to be happening is that it's being used outside of the classroom for planning and assessment and reporting and what have you. But there's not a huge amount going on, certainly not in a systematic way, inside the classroom. What we actually have is we have an awful lot of shadow AI use. And that's shadow AI used by teachers and by students. You know, we have a lot of students, and, you know, you just need to get a group of kids in a room together. And I think I've had the advantage of working with schools and working with groups of students in the last sort of year or so, where I'm not one of the teachers and I'm not one of the school leaders. And they've really opened up to me, you know, and they're basically saying, well, quite frankly, if, you know, you can do what you like to try and control it. We are going to use these tools. You know, it's pointless you trying to stop us, because we will use these tools. You know, and they're very open, not in an arrogant way at all. They're just really, really open. But then on the other hand, you've also got students who don't like using the tools, who actually, my eldest daughter, who's just started university, she's one of them. She said, there's no place in my life for AI at the moment, which I quite like the way she phrased that. I don't need it. You know, she's doing English like I did. She said, I've got my books, I've got my tutors, I've got my Shakespeare, and I love that. I love the fact that she doesn't feel that there's a place for it in her life. But my argument is always, that's great now, it's fantastic now, but The challenge you may have when you're entering the workforce is that you will be up against, you just need to look at the data. I mean, there are more and more, just look at the Big Four as a really good example. More and more of these companies are taking school leavers who've got good AI skills. So actually, if you're going to go into the workplace without some sort of understanding of how to leverage AI to support you in your professional development and your learning, then actually you could potentially be at quite a big disadvantage. So I think we've got to be kind of mindful of that. You know, on the one hand, that we've got, you know, some teachers who are, you know, terrified of it. You've got some teachers who are embracing it. Most teachers and most students are using it in the background and not telling anyone. But you've also got employers openly saying, we're desperate. We need people with decent AI skills.
It's funny that, sorry, Simon, to cut across you there, but Darren, it's funny that you say that, and we've spoken about the academically struggling students who are, or those who are academically absent. The very academically present kids have a variety of opinions too, right? They really resent teacher use of it.
Oh, absolutely.
If I wanted AI feedback, I could have got that myself. Like, that is a common refrain I hear.
Say exactly the same thing. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
And in the independent and the private sector and so on, like, the question becomes, what are we paying you for? I've heard parents say that in schools, and that's fascinating. Suddenly, then the commodification of education is being undermined by AI. And where you stand philosophically on that argument is another thing entirely. But it's really interesting, and that gives me hope as well. The kids are looking at AI output and somehow instinctively recognizing AI slop at 1,000 yards. You know, they really do. It's ironic. It's sometimes hypocritical, but they don't want their teacher using AI on them and their work, even if it was AI generated themselves. You know, it's really interesting.
Just really quickly, just to that, and then because there's just one other thing to add to that, just to sort of build on that. I had one kid, I love this, and I've been dining out on this for the last year. He said, and these were the exact words, he said, if the teacher uses AI to set the work and the teacher uses AI to assess the work, why should I do the bit in the middle? I just thought, wow. Wow.
And again, it comes back to how is it going to benefit learning? Because I think I have a slight concern as well at the moment that teachers will possibly use this because there is an overwork crisis, I think, going on, the perception, or at least there's a perception from people within the cyber profession. And I worry that there'll be teachers setting work that they don't know the answers to, you know, the creation of products that they don't have that sort of subject knowledge about, because ultimately in this, I do feel that when we've got solutions to speed up how we are able to work, someone will always find more work to add to the pile. And so something's going to give. And will that actually then ultimately have a negative impact on learning?
I mean, gosh, there's an extent to which, you know, like the notion of work being set by AI, and then students completing the work with AI, and then it being graded with AI, means that we have literally stepped into the world of, you know, what Baudrillard called the simulacra. It's like, it's a complete hyper reality. And of course, that is not conducive to what anybody would think would be a beneficial system, right? So, but it sits in tension with this kind of underlying thing in education, which is always about trying to understand how we can conserve what was good of the past whilst bringing into being the new framework, right? So education's always in this tension. It always wants to try to conserve what was and what was good about the past, whilst trying to push it forward into this next paradigm of where we're going, what we're trying to do, how we're trying to understand the world, etc. And what we see is this kind of race with AI to integrate these technologies. And it's the same with EdTech in general, you know. So it's not just something with AI. It's this idea that the world is a world of optimization. So we must introduce every tool of optimization in order to optimize individuals to be the optimal individuals within this system of productivity. And students, I think, to speak to what Rita and Darren were saying, are starting to realize that actually that is just a self-replicating system. And they are starting to see through that and see through that kind of facade of productivity and asking themselves, okay, but what would it actually mean to learn to use AI productively, etc., etc. So yeah, it's yeah. Well, I can speak more on it, but let's move on to the next bit, Tim, because I think you've probably got some other questions.
Before you do, though, can I just put a provocation out there? And I think I'll probably turn to Chris for this one, because being in the classroom currently, is there a chance that this is like the final throes of assessment? That this is, if we look at like LinkedIn and everybody's doing napkin tools and it's amazing until everybody's doing it and we're saturated, and then suddenly, you know, infographics are incredible, but then they all look the same and it devalues them. Yeah. Could this be the final devaluing of assessment? Could this be the one thing that education finally has to have a reckoning on? That maybe the essay is dead, maybe the, you know, the pre-written templated practical in science is dead. Maybe this is our opportunity to rethink group assessment or to rethink portfolio development or whatever it is. Could this actually be the final kicker? Because we're not going to do it otherwise. We didn't do it with EdTech. We didn't do it with the pandemic. We didn't do it when we had loads of opportunities with social media. Could this be the thing that finally pushes us into it?
Yeah, I mean, I think with assessment at the moment, I think the essay has long been dead. You know, as soon as AI was even a thing, there was the essay. The kids can just just do a simple prompting and get that. You know, I mean, I've sort of, my students have even said to me, yeah, well, you know, we'll just say that we're year sevens and, you know, an average ability and put in some spelling mistakes and, you know, it don't look too bad, really. Like, it's not what you wouldn't expect them to give you. The wider assessment, I think there is now a really good opportunity for us to think about how we're assessing at GCSE and A-level, and whether those qualifications can be done in a different way. And, you know, I think that's something that wouldn't be possible without AI in the mix.
I think, just to add to that, I think there's a pull factor from the universities as much as there will be a push factor from AI. I think that it will be, the only thing that I think will really cause assessment to change is if we stop having to rely on sort of the UCAS points in their current form. Because right now the university's tails always wag the school dog, you know. And I think, again, if you just look at the data, if you look at the statistics that are coming through now, if you look at the number of companies that are looking, you know, if you look at the rise of apprenticeships, for example, if you look at the amount of effort that's been put into the apprenticeship sort of sector in the UK. No, I mean, but again, not just in the UK. I mean, there's a big push if you look at Vision 2030 in KSA and in the UAE as well. I mean, it's happening across the world, not just in the UK. We're actually seeing an increase in a desire. And I have a theory on that. And my theory is that I just feel like kids have just got more intellectually mature, even though actually what we've seen coming out of the US in the last few days is that they're cognitively less developed than our generation. I believe it's, as a whole package, they're kind of more mature. It feels like, and again, I've got a 9-year-old. My 9-year-old uses AI and he builds games and he does coding and he's so much more mature than I was at his age. I mean, really, so much more mature. Feels like age 18, 19 is the age where they actually can go and they can get work, and because they're almost emotionally more ready. Is it because of social media? I don't know. They just feel more grown up in many ways. And I just wonder whether that will cause more to go into work and not go to university. And I wonder whether that will have the pull, you know, I call it, I know it's a bit of a naff term, but trickle down academics. You know, will it trickle back down into schools to the point where actually there is no longer so much of a need for GCSEs and A-levels, because they will be moving in a direction which is not the normal path to university.
I mean, I certainly sort of hear the rumours that degrees are getting devalued as it is, you know, because there are other inherent problems within it. But I sort of do wonder if students are indeed becoming more mature, or if what we're starting to get is a little bit more in the way of closed spaces from our young people, because we sort of see the pressure of social media, we see the kind of reactions to that. I feel like I see within the classroom the ever increasing levels of difficulty that students have to engage in conversation and to be able to hold conversation, to be able to hold attention. We see the ever increasing mental health concerns, we see ever increasing SEND concerns, we see ever increasing problems with sleep and distractions and cognitive overload. And I do feel that instead of seeing increasing levels of maturity, I do think that maybe on some topics that students we're sort of losing something, that we are producing academically more content driven young people, yet literacy rates are going down. We're seeing social kind of concerns coming out. I don't know if we're seeing them. For me, I don't know if we're seeing a maturity of students.
I would agree. I would agree, actually. I would say I see Darren's point that there is a wider cognitive critical capacity that young people have to navigate a complex media saturated information landscape. But those are emergent, new, interesting aspects of intelligence, of ability. But I think the traditional aspects that Tim laid out, the ability to hold attention, to have depth, etc., these are being eroded by the optimization logic of AI, because the more you interact with AI, the more you become output driven. And you said, Tim, this idea of being more content driven. Well, of course you will be, because content and output is absolutely frictionless. It's so easy to just tap into the machine and get the output. And I think we need to be careful, actually, to lead either into this idea that we want to try to rescue the way of being from the past because the way things used to be was better, or also jump too far ahead of like, oh well, they're young people are actually much more capable than they were in the past. I think we need to understand that there's these two conflicting streams, and we need to start to reimagine what we are doing in order to try to bring those things together. And then just finally, to speak to the thing about assessment, yes, it could usher in this new paradigm, but also let's just be honest. What really is happening is that people just don't set essays anymore. They just don't set homework. You just do it all in class, right? That's what I do. That's what all my colleagues do. You don't set essays anymore, right? You do it in class because at the end of the day, they're going to have to do an exam where they won't have AI in front of them. In fact, I even tell my students now, whenever we're talking about something, they have to close their laptop, because I have a few of them who will just literally be tapping on their AI, right? I used to use this lovely tool called Kialo, which is an online debate tool, which is really lovely. You can like have debates. I can't use it anymore because it just gets filled up with AI slop. So, and I talk to the students about how they're losing out because of that. And the real thing that we need to be bedding into our education systems is the idea of what would it mean for me to flourish, and how do I learn self-control? Because in a world of ease and frictionlessness, the only thing that you have stopping you between you and the easy answer is your own self-control and your own set of values. And our education system at the moment is not set up to provide the teacher training, the frameworks, or anything to really embed values for a changing world. And that is what we need to do in the face of AI, more than any other sort of technical fix or whatever.
I think there's a potential that you're both right here. Like, it's not necessarily maturity, it's savviness, it's self-censoring, it's protection, it's self-radicalization, it's knowing when to say what. I mean, we often say to ourselves, God, weren't we lucky to grow up before all of this? But I'm fairly sure that anthropologists can track it in TV shows over time. They can see where the populace in general got more guarded and less open and maybe less naive. And that's what I see in young people. I see an overwhelming sense of everything. that they were that we would have been protected from as kids. So it's an imposed maturity, maybe, and it's a savviness, it's a contextual analysis that I wish they didn't have to have. I wish they didn't have to think like that.
And I wonder whether that has a lot to do with just this that they pull from the source more than we ever did. I mean, you can just go onto TikTok and they can see things happening live across the world that are unmediated. I mean, obviously there's mediation. We know that there are gatekeepers, but ultimately it's possibly less mediated than it used to be, and therefore they are growing up faster. I think they have in my opinion, generally a stronger sense of moral conviction, and they want to make the feeling I get is they want to make a difference. They feel frustrated and they're stuck in a system which, quite frankly, is just they see as being irrelevant, and they want to make a difference, and they want to be allowed to make a difference. So again, I guess my point is, if we can start using these tools to look more at the process of that rather than the constant endpoint. I mean, AI's killed endpoint assessment. And you talk, Simon, about well, we can just close the laptops, blah blah. That's fine, and they're just going to sit in an exam. That's fine, but it won't be long before they will have AR glasses and they will have AR contact lenses, and they will simply be able to just see what they can see through their glasses. And the examination only has a few years left, probably. So we have to start looking. It's less about reimagining. It's about completely sort of reviewing everything that we do, because right now kids just they're bored, they're switched off, they're disenfranchised. I've got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old. My 6-year-old is literally just at my feet here, so she's just sitting perched by my feet, which is why the doors open. It's quite cute. I look at the two of them and I think they're moving into a world which is just utterly unrecognizable, and we have to think about what that means for all of the age groups, not just the ones that are going off to university now.
100% agree, but just very quickly, I would say that it's probably not as going to happen as quickly as we think. So never underestimate the ability of schools and society in general to use draconian, authoritarian means to take things off young people, control what they wear, control what they use, control all these things. So I could quite easily see a future where, you have every student being lined up and asked to take out their contact lenses or their AI lenses or whatever, et cetera, et cetera. I think that will happen first. You can see it with the social media bans and everything. And then finally, they won't be able to deal with it because it will become too ingrained. So I do agree with you. I just think it's going to take maybe a little bit longer, because I think there'll be a big pushback there.
Isn't this the thing, though? I don't think anyone's going to mourn the sort of end of the traditional exam and the amount of pressure that puts on our young people. At the same time, we just seem to be full of these juxtapositions. Like we know that ever increasing screen time is a bad thing for our students, yet more and more of our solutions increase the amount of time that we advise they spend on a screen. And I do sort of worry about it. Sam Altman had sort of called ChatGPT a calculator for words, but he also said that ChatGPT has the ability to manipulate and persuade, and obviously that things are sort of can quite obviously be made up, which means that we will have at some point in our future facts that are factually incorrect, but they are now facts. I can imagine ChatGPT getting the date of the Second World War wrong, for example, and that becoming fact in the future. And I do worry about what version of AI we're putting in front of students. So let's kind of tap in, I guess, into that sort of experience. Like, what are we seeing that schools are doing in order to ensure that AI is being used to benefit learning?
I mean, just to kind of go back to what I just said, I'm not seeing a great deal of it being used in front of students in any sort of strategic way. I mean, I don't know whether Rita and Chris or you're seeing that more, but I see very little of it, to be honest with you.
I think it's more at the moment to do with staff using it for planning and admin tasks and that type of thing. I think with actual students, it's more complex because you then need to make sure that they're safeguarded and that they're going to be doing something sensible, because what you end up with is, if they're just tapping away into any AI really, then they're just going to get it to do the work for them. I think that goes back to what you were saying. You know, they need to make sure that when you're teaching with it, that you're using sensible pedagogy so that the kids are actually learning. And at the moment, there's no real evidence either way. Are they able to get deep learning, or are they just tapping away and you know, producing
100%.
AI slop?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think, you know, the answer is, you know, is it improving learning right now? I think it's a bit of column A, a little bit of column B. You know, it clearly is improving performance, right? Performance of learners, performance of teachers. But, you know, as we've said a few times now, performance and learning is not the same thing, right? You know, learning isn't just producing the correct answer or a fluent answer. It's developing the capacities that underlie that. You know, the ability to reason, the ability to explain, the ability to respond, like we were just saying about, you know, the exam when the tool isn't there. So, you know, students can tap in, as Chris was saying, and, you know, produce like a really well structured essay very, very quickly. But, you know, hopefully we've all done this. When you sit down and actually ask them to talk you through it, they struggle because they don't really know how that argument actually developed, right? So like what is being lost is the false starts, the hesitation, the friction, right? And the friction is really, really important, you know, and we need to not be afraid of having friction in our classrooms and making learning difficult, right? That's why, for example, Tim, you said, get rid of like horrible exams. Well, yeah, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe exams are all right. Maybe it's actually not so terrible that somebody has to sit in a room and remember stuff and be, you know, that's like
I tell you and I are going to have beef. Exams are a terrible way of assessing young people.
I'm being provocative on purpose. I'm not saying necessarily that I think it is.
No,
I'm just saying that
as many grenades in as possible.
That paradigm of friction, right? It doesn't have to be something that we get rid of necessarily 100%. It can be part of a wider toolkit. The problem at the moment is that it's the only tool, I think.
Can I take us in a slightly different direction? Because what I have seen was a gaping lack of comfort and confidence about how to speak to kids. What am I allowed to say? What should I not say? How can I model this? Where are the ethics? Where's my personal opinion? So obviously in my past, I'm a curriculum developer. So when you've got a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So I was like, brilliant, let's solve this with curriculum. And plotting a K through 12 or a key stage 1 through to key stage 5, whatever you want to think of it, figuring out what kids need to know in terms of literacy and ethics towards a moving target, huge. Like I want you to imagine how we've spent the last 8 months trying to write a curriculum that had the lowest possible entry level for teachers who have no time to upskill, who have no confidence that they could make a really solid determination as to whether this is a valid use case or not. And so it took us months. It took us absolutely months to figure out, like, how do we have something that can stand alone? How do we have something that can integrate into classes? How do we make some value judgments that we can stand over and support and then articulate? How do we make sure that they're doing model familiarity, but also thinking about the sustainable impact of AI? How do we make sure that we put a foot into vibe coding, but also we, you know, talk the hell out of academic integrity and cognition? Like, it's a huge, huge ask when you think about it. You're asking teachers who in the last 15 years have had to implement EdTech, who've had to implement social emotional learning, who've had to bring in UDL, who've had to so we've piled everything on, and curriculum is always additive. Nobody ever wants to drop anything, right?
Yeah.
And this is what is happening here. Is that we have an option, we have this paradox that maybe AI could remove everything, but to get there, you better learn all this stuff first and then put it into place and then measure its impact and. Like it's a ridiculous request that we're making of teachers. And that was not a plug for the curriculum.
This is in part though how it's being sold, right? It's that the DFE have come out and said this will be time saving, this will be exactly what teachers are going to need. The EEF said that for lesson planning, it's going to reduce time by 31% for planning lessons.
Where did they get that from, really? I mean,
and what will it do to quality?
Well, these are the other things, because that's what I'm really worried about.
Meaningless number.
Are we actually going to be getting this kind of thing, and also what are we getting? Oh, sorry, what are we giving up in order to get that 31% back? You know, in terms of me planning a lesson, you know, I have to think about the students I have in front of me. I have to think about the learning needs. I have to think about the one Mandarin speaker who's sitting at the back of the room and is struggling to engage in resources. Is AI actually going to save me time? Is that what it's the magic bullet for? It's actually help it.
But no, so can I just speak to that quickly? You know, saving time is not trivial, right? Teachers are, as Rita said, you know, they are completely put upon. But I really don't think that the workload will simply just disappear. It's just going to shift, right? Because you have to do different stuff. You have to verify. You have to check the authenticity of stuff. You have to sit down with students and talk about the authenticity. You need to think about, I don't know, the safeguarding implications, or, you know, Rita with the assessment redesign, etc. So the question isn't really like, what is the save time like return to? It's about, can it strengthen relationships and discussion and dialogue? If it just is going to accelerate this kind of output culture, then we might save a few minutes, but we are like hollowing out what education should really be about, because the whole problem is this culture of education as output. It's this instrumental framing. And yeah, if it's just framed as like this wonderful time-saving tool, then we're not really thinking about what the reality of this is, you know.
I think that's the danger, isn't it? Because everybody is saying, oh, you know, you're going to save time, you're going to save time planning, you're going to save time with your admin. But in reality, that time that's saved, you're not spending that with the children in the classroom. You're doing other tasks that have been added on as you know, oh, and by the way, you've got this extra time. Can you do this? And can you do that? And that is, I think, the danger. It's, you know, just constant more tasks, endless tasks, sometimes completely pointless tasks that you don't really need to be doing anyway.
And yet, let me just shout out to Darren on this one. And yet, if it 10x's us, right, as the software bros always love telling us, it's going to 10x us or 100x us. If it can change the way that I approach my teaching, and it happens to save me time or not, great. I think work always expands to fill the vacuum. And I think you've seen this already in schools. If the expectation is now that 10x is the new normal, then that we're just going to, there's never been a better time to burn out. Like, there's never been an easier way to work ourselves to death. And I think that's where the safeguards come in. And already in Ireland, we've seen that the Irish teaching unions are asking for an indemnity against AI malpractice. Like, that's huge. I never thought we'd be there that quickly, but the teachers want protection from, you know, students suing them or parents suing them because of AI impacts. And we haven't thought through any of this yet. Like, it's significant.
No, we're all making it up as we go along.
We're all waiting for the grown-ups to tell us what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And there are no. And who are the grown-ups? Sam Altman.
It's us people. It's us here.
Yeah, we can look to Sam Altman, are we, to give us direction? Yeah.
And in a really practical way, Rita, you know, you say the work always fills up the vacuum. You know, there's this massive push to teachers having to be curators of like stockpiles of resources for their students, right? And that's just accelerated now in a time of AI. So it's not good enough for you just teach your class, they've got a textbook and they have to go out and no, you have to have curated for them a basically another online version of the textbook with all these links and everything. And of course, in an age of AI, what is everybody doing? Pumping a few prompts into AI, filling up their OneNote with AI generated stuff. Oh, look, all the parents are jumping on and saying, oh, look, that looks so wonderful. Look how on it this school is, and look how on it these systems are. When in fact, once again, it's all this performative element, right? It's the performance of productivity, and AI allows for the performance of that productivity, you know. And
but if there's a kid in that class,
really is,
if there's a kid in the class who had a medical need or an academic need, and I'm able to help them for the first time in my teaching career, then that's amazing. Like that is worth it. And that's where the time has to be preserved and directed. But it's having the discernment to be able to say that, and having the confidence to be able to go, do you know what, this is nonsense and this is good. And that's what I don't see in schools. I don't see that level of baseline confidence.
And I think that a lot of that comes down to the fact that on the one hand, you've got the government saying AI productivity, productivity, productivity. And yet on the other hand, what are they providing us? Substandard, quite frankly, platforms. I mean, I'm sorry, but you know, the one that's been funded £43 million or will have been funded £43 million, but is yeah, exactly. That was the commitment back in 2018 or 2019 when it was first set up. It is, in my opinion, not good enough, not fit for purpose. You've got the direct, what is it called, the AI Skills Directory, whatever, which is an absolute waste of the £2 million that they paid. Is it PwC or whoever it was who were paid a vast amount to pull that thing together? You know, so on the one hand, you've got, you know, AI's this and that and the other. On the other hand, you've got, you know, tools which quite frankly are not fit for purpose. But then we've actually got the opportunity to use tools like, I mean, when I often show people how to use Notebook LM. It's a great tool. It's free, works really well. It's really simple to use. It's pretty reliable. It's getting better and better with the various studio features that are, you know, and I do a lot of work with SEN, just to your point, Rita. Yeah. I just did a big piece of work with NAS and, you know, National Association of Special Schools. And there's one school in North London, and they do an amazing thing, because basically what they have is they have a notebook. They're a Google school, so they can use these tools kind of safely. And that's another big can of worms, safety and data security and GDPR and all that sort of stuff, all that good stuff. But basically they have a notebook for each student. It has completely transformed how they are able to serve the needs of their students, because it's basically a knowledge base on every single student. They can bring in curriculum, they can bring in reports, they can bring in X, Y, and Z, and it's got to know the students so well, because it's able to hold so much data on those students. That for me is transformative AI use. It's not spinning up some generic lesson plan with where the kids, as Rita said, the kids are like, well, this is AI slop. There is, you know, there was always a danger with AI. It's like AI is bad or AI is good. Well, no, actually, there's some really good uses of AI and there's some really terrible uses of AI. And we need to be putting our attention, and quite frankly, government, if you're listening, you need to be putting your money into the good uses of AI and stop funding the substandard uses of it.
Yeah. More than stop funding it, put some guardrails or some walls up around these kids, put some moats around them to make sure that they are not the proprietary victims of monetization, of commodification, of SaaSification, of like delicious data sources that they are, future market sectors that they are. Put some protections around them.
Exactly. And that was my argument. You know, before we started recording, I was talking about my TES article about social media bans. And that was my argument. It was, rather than pushing back responsibility onto children, for, you know, saying you can't have access to things, why don't we actually push responsibility back onto government and to actually regulate the AI companies and the social media companies to put, you know, the appropriate guardrails around these things to ensure that they are, you know, created in a way that is safe. That would be a much better, talking about, you know, the use of money and funding at the moment. I think that would be a much better use of money and funding, rather than, you know, jumping on this bandwagon of, oh, you've got something that can make you a lesson plan. Well, in all honesty, yeah, I mean, yeah, don't get me started on lesson plans in general, but
this is now where I lose hope. Sorry, Tim, this is now where I lose hope in terms of, like, look what's happening to the EU AI Act. Like, it's going to be a death by 1,000.
Yeah, it is. So I know.
I guess the question is, do the billionaires always win? Like, is that where we are?
Yeah, that's it. Who's driving progress within schools? It doesn't feel like the educational professionals within schools are the ones driving progress. It seems to be the monetization of resources. We saw it with how we were supposed to be utilizing social media in school, how we've been supposed to be using EdTech within schools, how we're supposed to be using devices in school. And I just feel that we never really developed the learning capacity of these resources to the extent that they could be leveraged. You always ended up kind of going, we've got a great idea, let's use it. Okay, Ofsted not looking at this anymore, so let's move on to the new thing. Okay, I'm just going to stop us there and just leave the penny spinning as we kind of come back to the idea of workload. But just a shout out to AQA. AQA know teachers are real experts in the classroom. That's why they work closely with teachers like you, like us, and combining your insight with their assessment expertise to create resources, tools, training, and guidance that genuinely make a difference. They're the UK's most chosen assessment organisations, so chances are you already know their work. And as we head into exam season, AQA are focused on helping teachers feel supported and ready. So if you want to find out more about how they're working with teachers like you, then just head to their website to find out a little bit more. Okay, who's actually going to benefit from this? We've talked about workloads, we've talked about learning, and now I just want to understand who's actually going to benefit from this, because you've got to love Sam Altman because he's so quotable, because he is he is out there talking about this and sort of at times being very honest, but he says that AI will be the great equalizer. But at the same time, the Sutton Trust were carrying out research with about 10,000 teachers in July 2025, and they found the opposite. They found that teachers in private schools were twice as likely to have received formal AI training. So that was 45% versus 21%. Private schools are 3 times more likely to have a clear AI strategy. And within the state sector, teachers in outstanding schools are 3 times more likely to have had training than those in schools that were rated requires improvement. And Nick Harrison, who is the CEO of the Sutton Trust, has kind of called it the digital Wild West. And to kind of quote him directly, he said it's startling how rapidly an AI digital divide is opening up in schools. The DFE says that this is cutting edge. These AI tools are going to be amazing in the hands of teachers. They're going to level the playing field. But with what training and with what budget and with what time? So has AI got the potential to level the playing field for all students, or is it already doing the opposite and we're seeing a diversity divide once again?
I mean, just to jump in, it really, in independent schools, it's coming in as like a premium enhancement, right? And it's going to enhance your learning. It's going to enhance your abilities as a teacher, as an educator. It's going to let you do X, Y, Z. Whereas in the state sector, it's like a cost-saving shortcut. And if it's going to enter in those different ways, then it's just going to widen inequality, because it's not about who has access to the tool, right? We know that everybody pretty much has access to the tool, Some people can afford to pay the 20 quid a month for the premium version. Some people can afford to pay the 200 quid a month for the super duper one. I've always been interested to know what the difference is. I've never seen it working, so I have no idea. But really, it's all about, are the adults being trained properly on how to use these things? What are the norms around AI use and how that you're supposed to navigate it? And are students being helped to look at AI reflectively? So, access alone is not equity, right? There needs to be formation with that. So I think it really depends on how it's being presented. If it's just being laid in front of someone, in fact, it could have the opposite effect. If some kid, this idea that, every kid's got a tutor in their pocket. Well, yeah, but what if no one's ever showed them how to use that tutor in their pocket effectively? That tutor in their pocket is not like a real human tutor, or it might be like a really bad human tutor who just does the essay for you, which is not a tutor, it's just an essay mill, right? That's not a good tutor in your pocket. Like when I tell my students who have used essay mills, that person who did that for you is not your friend, right? They have not helped you. They've deeply, deeply damaged you, right? And that is not a good thing. Well, this is exactly the same thing. If you just give this tool to a student without any framework around it, they've got this negative tutor in their pocket who's just a bad actor who will just do the work for them. Whereas if you give them the tutor in their pocket with all the framing around it of, this is how you use this person properly, this is how you prompt it properly, this is how you use study mode effectively, this is how you use Notebook LM, then you've got something robust. So once again, I guess that's a question of funding and capacity. Where's the government going to put the money in? Independent schools can do this stuff. International schools can do this stuff. They've got the money. Has the state system got it? you know, and especially around the world. This is not just about England. You know, there's going to be a great discrepancy around the globe as we see different countries able to put resources into these things, and therefore will we see an even greater inequity between nations which can afford to, you know, instill those type of values and nations which can't afford to.
I'm not actually seeing that divide that you mentioned between state and private schools. I think private state schools are just as much wanting to use AI to support better learning outcomes. So, and I think Ofsted have made that very clear. They you know, where they see AI, they expect to see it being used to not just to save money and save time, but to actually improve learning outcomes. So I definitely don't think that it is quite so binary. It's also not quite so binary with saying that all private schools have lots of money, because they don't. I mean, I've worked and managed small private schools. They're not all like the school that Tim and I once worked at, Brighton College. Some of them are actually quite cash strapped and are looking for ways that they can maybe leverage in the back office AI to save a bit of money.
Okay, but it's not really a question of whether they you know, they want to do this or not. Of course, you'd hope all schools want to have positive learning outcomes. I'm just saying that in the context of how this is actually provided to a student, if they know the right framework. So I guess you're right insofar as, you know, it doesn't need to necessarily be a question of money. You know, that this could be done without huge amounts of investment, but it still needs to be done, right? So maybe the difference isn't between schools that can afford it and not afford it, although I do think that is a factor, but it's definitely between schools that are willing to, or institutions that are willing to put those frameworks into practice and those that are not. That's the divide.
I think the biggest divide, in my opinion, is the divide between schools that are Microsoft schools and schools that are Google schools. And this, again, is just the work that I'm doing. I'm finding that the schools that have Google, and again, I'm not shouting out to either system. It just so happens that they're the two major systems that schools are using.
Yeah.
The schools that are Google just at the moment are at something of an advantage, because there is just more AI, which is useful from an education perspective. If you compare Notebook LM and Gemini with Gems and Storybook and what have you to Copilot, there's just a difference. And so I think schools that are Google schools are just able to innovate a bit more. And I think that's showing in what they're able to achieve. And it's just, you know, I will train schools in using Google tools, and you'll see them like, oh my goodness me, that's amazing. Yeah. Try the same with Copilot. Oh, it hasn't worked. Oh, it give me a substandard PowerPoint again. So I think that for me is the divide.
Can I add something here that I worry about beyond the immediate? Two things. I think, first of all, they're free and accessible and democratic for now. Right? We know how freemium works. We know how dependency moves into over dependency. So that I mean, if we put Uber aside, let's talk about like disruption. Moving fast and breaking things always leads to broken things, and we'll be, as educators, picking up those pieces. But for me, the darkest timeline is where AI becomes the standard, and it's human artisanal education that becomes really valuable and really like expensive, because at the moment an experienced teacher and AI is a magic combination. But how do we get experienced teachers, right? And over time, if that becomes the sourdough, the artisanal bread, the delicious, you know, the thing that we want, and only very few people can afford and sustain and maintain it, then that's my biggest concern, is that AI is put in as a placeholder for education and only certain people get a human plus AI.
Yeah. And Rita, I honestly think that is the future. I think
have I just won this debate?
For us to not, for us to do.
Yeah.
Well, I think it will be very
on that bombshell.
Yeah, I think it will be very difficult to avoid that future unless we are willing to radically disrupt the way we understand education and what it's for and how it functions within society. I think unless we are willing to do that, that will be the future. It will become, you know, the same as when we've got, you know, synthetic meat. There will still be people who want the real meat, right? Real flesh, and it will become a premium product, right? For those who can afford it.
But it can only become a premium product if people know how to utilize it to leverage the benefits in the classroom for learning. And you know, if we don't invest, if we are sort of selling these, which is what the government is certainly doing, it's what the sort of AI bros are doing. If we're not training people on how to leverage it properly within the classroom, we're always going to work in these silos, and we might get a few examples of great practice, but will we get consistent practice? The second thing is, what I worry about is that we often perceive our young people to be small adults, and they're not. And what are they going to be using it for? Are they going to go home and start saying, right, I'm going to really leverage, because I've had these lessons today, I'm going to really leverage my private tutor in my pocket? Or they're going to go home and say, look, you know, I've got these particular problems in my life, like I feel comfortable talking to you about it. And the data is what 72% of teens within the US are utilizing these things as a confidant, as someone they're sort of turning to solve their problems. Even if we are training ourselves to leverage these for learning, are our young people going to leverage these for their own learning, or are they going to leverage them for something else?
Only if what we're giving them to do is meaningful to them.
Yeah.
If we give them things, you know, Simon, you talk about friction and the importance of friction. Completely agree, but friction towards what? Because if it's friction towards a meaningless end that they don't own, then they will find the point of least resistance. But if they're working towards something that actually genuinely means something to them, then that friction is good, because they're struggling towards an endpoint that actually they care about. And that, for me, goes back to the first thing I said, you know, and I've been saying this for 3 years. How do we make schools places where everybody wants to be rather than has to be? And that, for me, is the key. And it's got nothing to do with AI. AI is it's just something that's shining a light on how broken our system is.
Yeah.
Cognitive surrender. That's what it is. It's not, that's with or without AI. Cognitive surrender is what we're fighting against.
Yeah, exactly right.
Yeah, and I think the other key term is cognitive debt, right? So, which is that, you know, idea that more that we use AI, the less we're actually thinking for ourselves, and what are we going to lose at the cost of this? So look, I'm going to sort of move towards wrapping up the show. I feel like we could talk about this all day, and once again, I'm really grateful to you. I'm going to do a quick sponsor shout out, but then I'm going to ask you just a couple of quick fire questions, and just to see where you stand. And you know, I would say that my quick fire quizzes tend to be the thing that brings the most fear to my guests on the show. This won't be done in such a hostile way, so you know, feel lucky. But I'll still pay you the very expensive sound effects that I've got. So this show is brought to you in partnership with Hachette Learning, publishers of professional development books and resources that support great teaching and learning in schools around the world. So level up, please, your professional development today, and visit www.hachetteLearning.com to explore the full range of titles. So we've made it. We've nearly made it to the end of the show. Now we have our quick fire quiz. There is no expense spared on the special effects here, but because it's our debate and our late debate show, rather than sort of putting each of you under pressure for a minute to answer as many questions as possible, what I'd like to know is where you stand, and I'd like you to answer the question in as concise a way as possible that maintains clarity and makes your position clear. And I'm just going to go round. Darren, I'll go with you first, Chris second, Rita third, Simon fourth, just because that's the order you appear on my screen. So my first question is AI. Will it do more good than harm in schools over the next 5 years?
If we keep the system as it currently is, more harm than good.
Chris?
Yeah, I think it will do more good than harm, as long as we can keep it under control.
Thanks. Rita?
If wiser heads don't prevail, more harm than good. But if we squander another opportunity, then shame on us.
Simon?
Well, that was very poetic. So I'm basically going to say the same thing, because if we design it to strengthen students' judgment, then it will be good. But if not, it will replace it, and it will cause a lot of harm.
I think, you know, over the next 5 years, I think AI is going to do a lot of good for learning of academic content, and a lot of bad for the social skills and the relationship skills and the nurturing skills that we want to see more of in schools.
Yeah.
So Simon, I'll start with you. Most teachers using AI right now are doing it well. You agree or disagree?
Look, most teachers are very thoughtful, they're very reflective, but the system is very, very incoherent. So the truth is, practice is very, very uneven, as Chris was saying earlier.
Okay, Rita?
Definitely not in any way, shape, or form. Well, sorry, I'll start again. Teachers don't know what they don't know, and that's not fair. But certainly the conversation around energy blindness, the conversation around systemic blindness, and the conversation around cognitive atrophy, or whatever we want to call, whatever is sexy to stick after cognitive. I think that is where you can't blame teachers for not knowing what they should be doing, because they just simply don't know. They don't know the fact that how much energy is used by how much prompting, and what is a good model and what is a bad model. It's imponderable for them at the moment, and that's hardly their fault. But no, I don't see excellent practice as a common spread approach at all.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think so either, actually. I think that the best intentions are there, but they're not using it as they should, really.
Yeah.
Darren?
What they said. I can't add anything to. I completely agree.
Yeah, I think we all have the same sort of concerns. So Rita, I'm going to start with you first. Would you be comfortable with your own children, students being taught primarily by AI for a term?
God, no.
Simon?
Would I be comfortable with my own children being taught by AI for an entire term?
Or your students being taught primarily by AI for a whole term?
Gosh, part of me is quite would be very intrigued by the social experiment, but definitely I don't think my wife would be happy with me doing a social experiment on my own children. So I'm definitely going to say no. But no, all jokes aside, no, I would not be happy. Not in the way that AI is set up at the moment.
Darren?
No.
No.
Yeah, no.
No.
Yeah, okay.
One appeared at
ask us,
nice moment. That was quite funny, actually. Good timing. No,
but ask us again in 6 months. That's the problem.
Yes,
You have to keep coming back to the same
right
question.
now. It's just not. It's an amazing tool, and I mean, it's an extraordinary tool. But would I want my 6-year-old daughter being taught all day? But I mean, Alpha School. People have just been turning away from that place because they just don't like it. They don't like the experience of being taught by a machine. So supported by a machine, maybe, not just purely taught by one. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Human in the loop, isn't it? That's the lingo. Human in the loop.
Human in the loop. Chris, we should pause AI adoption in schools until we have better evidence. Do you agree or disagree?
As much as I think it's a double-edged sword, I don't think we should pause it. But we should be definitely being careful with how we're implementing it.
Yeah. Sam?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't think a total pause is realistic, but I do think we do need to slow down. This optimization obsession needs to be looked at, and we need to have clear guardrails in place and clear shared values and norms, because without that, things could get quite bad very, very quickly.
Darren?
Yeah, no, I just think there needs to be better. The leadership need to step into this. This is a leadership and governance imperative.
Yeah.
And interestingly, I spoke a few weeks ago on this, and I've never had a bigger crowd. I mean, it was just ridiculous. I mean, I had 5-6 back outside of the speaking area, and it was half of them wouldn't have had no idea who I was. It was because I was talking about the fact that every school needs to be leading AI.
Rita?
Darren, you've teed up my Hachette learning plug. So I've just written the AI guide for school leaders in terms of governance and policy development.
There you go. Pay me later.
Hachette will be pleased with us, Tim. But ultimately, I think, to pause it now would be an exercise in futility, right? It would be neither of use nor of ornament to schools. So something else. I cannot get over 45 million being spent on something that isn't currently meeting the need. I think that's egregious. So I'm still shocked about that, to be honest. So I think pausing it now is utterly impossible and pedagogically futile, but urgent, accelerated, deep thinking on this and some value determinations are what's needed yesterday.
Yeah, I really wish we could pause it. I'm going to move on. I'm going to beat my drum in the background and just solve it out.
How would it work,
okay.
Tim? Honestly, how would it work? If you paused it, how would it work?
Yeah, but you asked me a question because I'd like to disinvent things, and that's the big problem, which we can't do.
You know, ultimately, works, Tim. You know, you're a historian, but you know.
That's it. I mean, I look at AI and I wonder what it's actually doing that's benefiting our young people at the moment. I have real issues about things that increase the amount of screen time for students. I think our young people have a poorer relationship with sleep. I think social media is a constant wiring of switching everybody on. I feel that we have become so driven by content, and that this is a sign of success, is that we increase the amount of content in our curriculums and schemes of work, that as a history teacher, I don't have time to breathe as a teacher. I don't get to play with the subject. I don't get to show the students why they fell in love with the subject. We are just cranking and getting to the exam, and I fear that AI will increase that level of pressure on our young people. And I also think that rather than developing relationships within the classroom, which I think has been my thing in the classroom for the last 20 plus years, is my ability to develop relationships with young people, to show a genuine interest. I think is becoming harder, not because I care less. I mean, I'm probably, because I'm getting older, becoming a little bit less relevant. But I do feel there are so many things that add to the cognitive load of our students that there is less and less space for those things that I think are really important. So is it possible? Probably not, because we're being forced by the beat of someone else's drum in order to deliver outcomes on AI, but we are delivering with people who are not trained to deliver it, who don't understand the safeguarding aspects of it. That's something I've talked to several of you guys about in our sort of pre-show conversations, is about the concerns with safeguarding and whether those things are out there, and whether there are slightly more nefarious practices being used by certain AI companies that are sort of trying to generate revenue and increased investment from young people. I don't know. I look at it and I think, we're being forced to do something that we have no evidence to support, because we're being forced to march to that beat.
Yeah.
So,
but fundamentally, it is a symptom of that wider malaise, isn't it, within the system, which is that everything, I've used the term so many times this evening, but everything is optimized. Everything is understood as a means to an end in a system that is set up to create value and create outputs. And I am a philosophy teacher at heart. I love my stoicism. I've got my can't touch this mug here. He's not my favorite philosopher, but that's my funniest mug I have. But what we need to do is reorientate education towards what does it mean to flourish.
Yeah.
And AI can be, we can't put the cat back in the bag. It's out, but we need to keep our eyes firmly focused on what that would mean, especially as things get much more complex. And we can't just let ourselves be taken in by EdTech. My students love, I've just become like really Socratic in my classes now. Students, that they say it's the best. I use tech every now and again to do bits and pieces, but basically we read stuff, and we talk about it.
I say burn it down. But I am aware. I apologize. We have been talking for a long time. I am so grateful to my guests. There are so many things on my list of prompts to talk about tonight, but we've run out of time. And I think the debate can certainly continue. We have set out to try and disagree tonight. I felt like we were all way too fluffy and agreed with each other. But it's so clear that we all care deeply about our students, and we do see things from different points of view. I don't think the conversation should end here. I think ultimately it's happening in our staff rooms. It's happening in department meetings. It should happen in the classrooms. And I think we've got to keep having these conversations and testing the robust nature of AI and why we're doing what we do within the classroom. I think we should keep disagreeing. I think we should keep putting students first, even when we don't agree on what that actually means. So I'd like to say a massive thank you to Simon, to Rita, to Chris, to Darren for taking the time to appear on the show tonight and to engage so thoroughly and warmly in our debate. You have been listening to the debate show with Tim Smale on Teachers Talk Radio. Thank you very much to all of our guests. and have a wonderful rest of the evening.
Outstanding and world-class vision, world-class this.
I'm a real leadership geek, honestly. I've spent my whole career reading books and chatting to people.
I just find the whole thing and the announcement, the way it's been announced, bizarre.
If you could move away from a model where teachers are so intensely focused.